Management here again to talk about lighting for your home studios. As always, I want to give a quick shout out to Kinetic Lighting for so graciously providing the equipment for this series. Now let's get started. Now when we talk about light, we're talking about light sources, and by that I mean what is generating the light. There might be a natural light source, like the sun outside, or an artificial light source, like the lights in your home studio. The important thing to do is be mindful of how do we control the light. Now it's kind of difficult to turn off the sun, but you can control the ways it comes into your home, and you want to be mindful of how it changes over the course of the day as you're recording. Sun at 9 a.m. is different than the light from the sun at sunset. It's different than the light from the sun in the middle of the night. So you want to be mindful of what time of day you're filming and how you can control for how the light comes into your room so you're always looking your best. That might even mean blacking out your windows in your studio so you have absolute control all the time in your studio. Now when we're talking about control, there are 4 major controllable qualities of light that we want to be mindful of. There's intensity, which is a measure of how bright the light is. There's directionality, which is where's the light coming from? Is it in front of me? Is it to my side? Is it behind me? There is also color, which doesn't just mean a light red or green or blue or white, but what kind of white it is. Is it a warmer white or a cooler white? Because that's going to have a massive impact on how you're perceived by your audience. And of course, there's also movement, which is any change in the state of a light. Is it getting brighter or dimmer, or is it actually physically moving across a room? Have you ever seen the sunset make the shadows go longer at the end of the day? You'll get an idea of what movement is in lighting that way. So the first controllable quality of light we're going to talk about is intensity or brightness. I'm going to demo that on this Roscoe LightPad Vector. Now intensity is a relative measurement, and that means that it's relative to what is brighter in a room or not as bright in a room. And you can see as I turn this guy on brighter and brighter that some cameras don't adapt to changes in brightness. We've gone and overexposed this image. There's not a lot of fidelity as the camera's unable to sense and take in this much light. On the human side of things, that's not the case. Our eyes automatically contract and dilate, the irises in our eyes automatically contract and dilate to let in more or less light. And you might experience this when you've walked out of a dark movie theater onto a sunny day. Your eyes actively opening its iris or closing it to let in more or less light so you can accurately perceive the world around you. So on some cameras, that happens automatically. It might happen automatically on your webcam, but on a studio camera like this one, it might be something you need to control for and balance in your studio. We also want to be mindful of the relative intensity of different lights in your composition. You want to try and balance for shadows of people's faces or shadows on the walls behind them. And we can see that with a discussion of how a shadow is discussed. That's going to be either soft or sharp, and as I turn this on and we look at the wall behind me, I have currently no shadow because we have a very soft light. Or as I move further and further towards the wall, you can see my shadow gets more clear, and that's an example of a sharper look. We try and work with mostly soft lights to give flattering compositions. The last thing we're going to discuss is how do you control intensity, and that can be local control, which is a dial on the back of the light, or it could be something as simple as where you are in relationship to your lights. I can go ahead and make this light seem brighter or dimmer by getting closer to it, or taking it a step away. And so you might go ahead and think about where do you space your lights in your room to go ahead and create the same balanced look. So the second controllable quality of light we're going to discuss is directionality, and by that I mean where is the light coming from in relationship to its subject. And we discussed that in terms of is this going to be a light that's in front of me, or a front light, or a light that's to my side, or a side light, or even a light behind me, or a backlight. We also discuss it in terms of its angle, of how high or low it is. I might have a light that's above me as a high front light, or flat front light, or a low front light, for instance. The important thing to think about when you're recreating your own home studios is how do you recreate natural angles of light. And if you think about what's natural, the sun is usually how we perceive the world around us, and it's usually overhead. That means that when we're creating home studio lighting, we oftentimes want to take our lights and put them above us to recreate the same shadows under the eyebrows and under the chin and under the nose that you'd see on a given day walking around. That's also when you're telling scary stories at the campfire, it's so unnerving to go ahead and see someone like this because the shadows are in the wrong places. They seem like they're something other and monstrous. And it's just all about how lighting can go ahead and affect how we perceive the people in the world around us. So our third controllable quality of light is color. And we typically get light in the form of just a white light, which is light directly from the sun that's white and has all the different colors that light can be. We know that because we can think back to prisms and the idea that light can be broken up into the various colors of the wavelengths of the spectrum of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Now, when we think about lighting for color, it's important to consider it both in terms of mood and rendering, in terms of what kind of atmosphere we're trying to cultivate, as well as how it renders the pigments in our fabrics, furniture, even skin tone. You can see that when we change my key light here from a white to a red. You can see that the mood of how you perceive me has changed drastically. I feel more like I'm Darth Vader right now. But it's also going to affect how well you can actually go ahead and perceive the true pigments of my skin tone, of my fabric, of my shirt, as well as what's behind me on the couch there. As we get back to normal real quick, we also deal with different color variations in white light, or light that has all of the colors of the spectrum. White light can be either warmer or cooler, and we talk about that in terms of color temperature, warmer or cooler light. And so orange light is typically warmer, or orange-white, and then orange-blue light is typically cooler. And you can see that that affects the rendering of the dyes in the pigment of my couch there as I go from a warm light to a cool light. Do you see how one suppresses all the blue in that pigment and one makes it pop out even more? This affects how people see you as well. So if I were to shine this at myself and turn it down just a hair, I'm guessing. Let's keep on. I can operate my technology. As we turn that down in intensity, you can see that I might look very different if I'm lit in a cool light versus a warm light. It's always important to be intentional with what kind of environment we're trying to cultivate in our studios so that we're making the right choices, we're making informed choices that are going to best represent us and our performances. The fourth controllable quality of light is movement. And movement can take several different forms. It could be about actually physically moving a light in one direction or another, like you might have lights fly out over the audience in a rock show. It can also be changes to the status of a light. If a light's getting dimmer or if a light's getting brighter, we can go ahead and pull focus to or direct attention from a part of the frame as a form of movement. We can also have changes to the color of a light to go ahead and comment on what's happening emotionally in a character or how we want to perceive an object. Now, those are all very narrative-driven choices, because most of the time, movement isn't a quality that you want to actually have changing in a home studio environment. Oftentimes, when you're filming something, you want to set your lights once, lock them in, and take your recording in a consistent environment. But what we're building here isn't just a recording studio, it's also a venue for performative artists to go ahead and share their artistry. And that means that if you're a theatrical artist, or you have to be a musician and you want to have the same kind of production value that you had when we could go to venues and provide actual lighting control, movement might be a tool you want to use to go ahead and underscore and support your performances.